Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So I hear that Brian's been hyping me up for some time. So I'll get into my testimony a little bit into this presentation, but when I first came to Beth Zion Messianic Synagogue, way back when, in Jackson, New Jersey, one of the first people I ran into was Brian. And I had been a believer for like 5 seconds. Like literally, I think about 2 weeks. And I had no contact with any believers from the moment I accepted Messiah to the moment I wound up at that Messianic synagogue. And I went in the back to go get a cup of coffee after services. And I mean, I was a little rough, right? Like right after I became a, believer. And I walked up to the coffee and I started pouring myself a cup of coffee. And he said, "How was service?" And I said, "It was effing great." And I tell you this because he consistently reminds me of this story. You could go back to the other one. Let me go to the family picture first. Yeah. There it is. I'm going to tell you like some pretty crazy, miraculous stuff that happened to me in my life, but the craziest thing I'm going to tell you is that I have 6 kids under 17 years old. My oldest is here with us today. His name's Max. The two flanking him, like on either side, are Jack and Emmy. They are my soon-to-be 15-year-old twins. The one wearing the pink sweatshirt is Abigail. She's going to turn 13 next week, so I have 3 birthdays in the month of July. And the two in the front are Nora, the taller one, and Ruby. Ruby broke her ankle on the first day of summer vacation in like almost cartoon fashion, right? Like they were out there spraying each other with the hose, and she slipped and her ankle hit the thing. So that is my family. I currently work for a group called the Almeida Initiative. I'm the development director there. We are based in the United States out of Seattle. We are a 501c3. We hold events that bring Christians and Muslims together over Ramadan primarily. We do a lot of different things, but the point is so that we can have honest conversations about faith, so that we can go in through the front door and we can tell Muslims who we are and what we believe, and we offer them the opportunity to tell us what they believe, because we want to have truthful conversations. Our tagline is conversations without compromise. We are not syncretic. We don't believe in multiple gods. We get that a lot. We get that a lot, particularly for Muslims, right, because of the Arabic symbol on our thing, which is just Arabic for the Almeida, which is the table. It's named after the fifth surah of the Quran. That talks about like rules of having people over and eating and how fellowship happens in the Islamic world. So we just kind of borrowed from that and decided that we were going to essentially co-opt it and make it about what we wanted to bring, which was the bread of life, to the table. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I came to the United States when I was 40 days old. My mother is Turkish, my father is from Afghanistan. My father was an Afghan refugee. He fled from the king of Afghanistan because he was a political activist. So my father is an Uzbek. That means the people of the north. You would probably know them if you were around during 9/11. They were part of the Northern Alliance, and they were trying to fight off the Taliban at the time. But way back when, my dad was trying to get more rights for his people and being an advocate for his people, and he drew a large following, which also drew a target on his head. The king of Afghanistan put a price on my father's head, and my dad had to run out of Afghanistan, him and a couple of friends, on extremely short notice. They walked over the mountains of Pakistan and into Pakistan, and they tried to get asylum, and that didn't work. So then they hired somebody to smuggle them into Iran, and they tried to get asylum there, and that didn't work. So they figured that the third time's the charm, right? They hired somebody to put them on a bus under a bunch of blankets and suitcases, and they went into Turkey. And my father's fortunes changed there. Since Uzbeks are considered a Turkic people and part of the larger Turkish world, Turks accept them as refugees. And, there my dad met my mom. They had 4 boys. I was born in 1974. And in 1974, the Soviets were trying to destabilize the Turkish government. They were giving the young people Marxist ideology. They were giving them drugs. People were getting shot on the streets. They were trying to gain a foothold in the Turkish government with the purpose of turning it into a Soviet satellite state. Now, my father, being no stranger to political turmoil, decided he was not going to raise his children in this manner. So, yes, thank you so much. And he looked at different places where he could take his kids. So he looked at France and Germany. There are a lot of Turks in Germany. I think doner kebab is like the national food of Germany now. That's not a joke. It actually is. And they chose the United States because everyone knows that the streets in America are paved with gold, right? So he took his family. I came here when I was about 40 days old. Just for a little bit of symmetry, when my father died, I took my oldest son, Max, there when he was about 40 days old to Turkey to visit my mom. So I came here and I was raised in beautiful Trenton, New Jersey. How many of you have ever been to New Jersey? How many of you have had the misfortune of going to Trenton? There's 2 of you, all right. I liked it there. I lived in Hamilton in the suburbs, but I grew up there as a Muslim kid, surrounded by Hispanic and Italian and Irish Catholics. So everyone, would go home for supper and they'd set the table and their parents would make them set the table, but we'd sat on the floor, right? We'd put a carpet down on the floor called the sofra, and my mom would bring out the bread and the food, and we'd all sit there, and we'd sit there crisscross applesauce and sit around the table and watch the nightly news with my dad making me get up every minute to change the channel, because that's what we did back then. And that's how I grew up, We had a dining room table, and it was really nice, but we weren't allowed to sit at it. We ate on the floor, and the good carpet was on the wall, right? It was decorative. It was expensive. And, that was fine. But growing up that way, your traditions don't really jive with other people's traditions, right? Everyone else is Catholic. They're having Christmas, and Christmas became the worst time of the year for me because everyone else is getting presents, and we're just kind of sitting at home watching It's a Wonderful Life for the 900th time, not really understanding what Christmas is all about. What's funny is that from the time I was in first grade to the time I was in 5th grade, and this is what kind of amplified it, I went to Catholic school. So I went to Catholic school in Princeton, New Jersey. My mother had a delicatessen, and right next to the delicatessen was a Catholic school. And I went there for 5 years, and that made things way worse, right? Because every day I'm dressing up like a Catholic school kid in my blazer and my tie and my shoes, and I go to Catholic school, and all I can participate is all of the worst parts of school: math, science, English, right? And we had a religion class, and I was pretty good at that, I guess. Maybe a little foreshadowing going on there, but but I was never allowed to take place in any masses or anything like that. And I would go home, and my dad would deprogram me. And he'd be like, "What'd you learn in school today?" And I'd say, "Well, we learned that, Jesus walked on the water. We learned about, Noah and the ark," right? And he would say, "Well, here's what we believe because we're Muslims." And he was being a good Muslim, right? He was being a good Muslim. I don't hold that against him. But he would sit there and he would tell me the Muslim point of view on things. And that's what I walked away with, because I was a Muslim going to a Catholic school. Sounds confusing? Yes, it's because it was. But I was learning to be a Muslim in a predominantly Catholic environment. When I was in 6th grade, I went to public school, and I stayed in public school all the way through the end of my public schooling career. So there was a point where, when you become a teenager, you start to question things. And I started to look at the way that the Muslims around me were behaving and how it was incongruous with what they were saying. I really saw some kind of haughty behavior coming out of them. There was a lot of piousness, but on the other side, it was just people acting like they were just better than one another, My flashpoint moment, I remember I was about 14 years old, and my father would have these no shoes, no booze parties, right? He would invite people over, and he was always just entertaining people. But when, the Afghans and the Turks would come over, it was a different story, right? It was just a bunch of Muslim guys coming over. And my dad would entertain them for 3-4 days at a time. My mom would cook and clean incessantly, right? Just always taking care of these guests, because that's huge in Islamic culture, right? If you were to come into the house of a Muslim, you're not accountable for anything. Don't try to pay for anything. It's their responsibility, according to the Quran, to take care of you, not the other way around. You can even see this in early Genesis, right? When Abraham sees God and the angels walking, and he invites them into the house, and he takes care of them, and he feeds them, right? It's a hospitality. I have a message I do on that called prophetic cheeseburgers, by the way. I love that one. So my mom would take care of these people, and there was one time they had just gotten up from prayer, so they had the rugs out, and they were praying in the living room, and they were done, so they put the rugs away, and then they lit up their cigarettes, and they were smoking, and my mother came and started giving them tea and food that she had prepared. And when they walked away, when she walked away, they started making fun of her, because she was Turkish, but they were Afghani, and they spoke Farsi. So they started making fun of my mother because she didn't speak Farsi. They were looking down on this woman who had, for days, been taking care of them. And not just one day, right? These are return guests. They keep coming back. And I thought to myself, you guys just got up from praying. You just got up from praying. You just got up from having a moment, right, where you're looking so pious while you're praying. And listen, I appreciate Islamic prayer, right? For the part of them that's trying to engage with God, it looks very involved. How about that, right? But then to walk away and not really experience anything, and to make fun of the woman who was taking care of you, I thought to myself, listen, I'm from New Jersey. You don't talk about my mama. That's the number one rule, right? You don't say anything about my mom, or you're in for a fight. So I saw these guys get up and do that, and I said, if this is Islam, I don't want it. I don't want to have this outward thing and not have the behavior that matches up. So about that time, I decided, you know what? I don't want to be a Muslim anymore. Because it's not just one, I said, this is a flashpoint moment. It had been building up to that time. And I said, I don't want to be a Muslim anymore. I just want to be an American teenager, right? So I started playing sports. I became a fan of my beloved Philadelphia Eagles, which y'all from New England, you're allowed to hate on them. It's fine. But we did beat you in the Super Bowl. It was a crazy game. It could have gone either way. Sorry. And I started playing football, and I wrestled, and I got really involved in sports. But my senior year, because of a scheduling error, I was about a half credit short because I took a study hall. And I showed up for the first day of football camp, and they said, you're not academically eligible. And I said, well, fix it. And they said, well, we can't. And I said, I'm going to go tell my parents. And they told my parents, we can't fix it. We cannot change your schedule. It's too late in the year. And then they told me that not only would I miss football season, I would miss pretty much all of wrestling season. and I would be able to come back for the last month of wrestling season. I don't know if you guys like remember or know, like what high school was like, or if you had kids in high school. That is from the beginning of September, and it runs all the way pretty much to like December. And I lost all of my organized life. I was going to practices, I was going to work, and then I'd go to practice. I'd go to work, and then I'd go to practice. And I was always just trying to engage that part of myself because I wanted to play college football. And then I lost it all. So what's the worst thing that can happen to a teenager in your senior year? You lose your people. You lose your people, you lose your system. You lose everything, and you're thrust into chaos. And listen, there's some things you should never do with a teenager, and it should never be, just figure your senior year out for yourself. So, in beautiful Trenton, New Jersey, there were the smart kids, and then there were the athletes, and then there was everyone else. And I was not smart enough to be with the smart kids, and I lost all my athletes. So I started hanging out with who was left. Now listen, when you grow up in that way, right? Growing up a Muslim in New Jersey around Catholics, you can feel kind of isolated. It can lead to depression. It can lead to other things. But in that moment, in my senior year, that's when everything just kind of exploded, right? I was isolated before. I had found my people. I lost my people. What I was doing to cope with that feeling of isolation and feeling alone and depression was taken from me. And I medicated it. I started hanging out with who was left. And the people who were left were the ones who did drugs. They hung out. And they did not care who you were. They did not care that your name was Aybars Uckun, and it's hard to pronounce. As long as you brought an eighth of pot, you were in. You could hang out with them no matter what, as long as you did what they did. So that became another journey for me. And I started to experiment with other drugs. I think at the time, by the time I was 23 years old, I had pretty much done everything except for heroin. Somebody at some party had passed me something or everything, and I had done it. Because in that regard, I was fearless, I was curious, and I was trying to cope. So if you've ever lived that lifestyle, or you know people who've lived that lifestyle, or even if you've just watched television, you know that that lifestyle has its consequences. I'm not a particularly good liar. I am not particularly good at hiding things, so I was particularly good at getting caught. And what happened to me was I got arrested, and I was sitting in the Trenton City lockup, handcuffed to a bench next to a transvestite prostitute wearing a blonde curly wig who was looking at me and licking his lips and batting his eyes. Now, when I say you're handcuffed to a bench, it's not like it is on Law and Order, right, where you're handcuffed and your arms are behind your back. They literally handcuffed me to the bench, like that. And I was so high, and I just kept passing out, and I would look at this fellow, and he would look at me and start licking his lips and batting his eyes, and I remember thinking to myself, God, get me out of here. Now, up until that point, I had kind of made my own belief system after walking away from Islam. I have a tattoo on my arm. You can't see it, but it's of a yin-yang in the shape of a sun. Because what I believed was that there was good and there was evil, obviously, in the world. But, in all evil, there's a little good. And in all good, there's a little evil. And, it's all going to come from somewhere, so there's some energy source like the sun. I believe that belief system, I created it, and it's called transcendental pharmaceuticalism, right? Because I was essentially a hippie, and I did drugs, and I just wanted to believe whatever I wanted to believe at that point. I made my own religion. But in that moment, I realized that I was incomplete. I was not whole. What I believed was not true. So I walked out of there. They gave me my hearing, and I left in the morning. And I walked out of that that station, and I was standing on the steps, just trying to catch my breath, and I thought to myself, God, I can't stop. Like, I realized that I did not have the self-control to stop. I could not stop myself from doing these things. So I, was kind of having a scared straight kind of period of my life. So I started looking into world religions. And I started trying to examine what I believed, because I believed that in this, right? In what the tattoo represented. And at that point, I was like, that's not true, because who was I talking to in the jail cell? What was I crying out to in that jail cell? So as I studied, I realized I didn't believe in a couple of things. I don't believe in karma. I did not believe in karma. I did not believe in ancestor worship. I did not believe in the Tao Te Ching, right? Like, I did not believe in those things. And then when I researched further, I realized I didn't believe in Hinduism. I didn't believe in Buddhism. And I came back to the belief that I had when I was a child, that there was a God. So I went to my dad, and my dad, he was extremely wise. People came from all over the world to hear him talk about things. He would go on speaking tours. He'd go to France, and he won an international poetry award because he used to write poetry that would inspire people to fight the Soviets, and also later the Taliban. So people would come from all over to hear him talk. And I went to him and I said, Dad, I'm in legal trouble, but I also have all these questions about God. Can you help me answer my questions? And he said, and you would hear this a lot from a Muslim, once you start pressing them on what they believe, he'd said, I'm not a scholar. I want to answer your questions, but I'm not a scholar. But I know people who can train you to be an imam, and they will answer your questions. And I thought to myself, this is a great idea. This is perfect. Because honestly, I thought that, it would give me structure. It would answer all of my questions. And that, was a path forward for me. And I think that happens to a lot of people, not that they become imams, but when they have moments of spiritual crisis, that they go back to the beginning. They go back to their point of spiritual origin. If you get married and you don't have faith, right, and then you have a child, I've seen this happen quite a bit. People automatically go, well, I got to raise this kid somehow, so I got to go back to church. So you go back to that moment where faith became real to you, and it's usually what your parents gave you. So for me, that made perfect sense. And what I said, what I tell people is that one day I'm going to write a book. And the book will be titled, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Mosque. Because my backup plan was, I'm a musician, I play a couple different instruments. Many of you know that I played with Brian and Sue. Did that picture ever go up? Yeah, put it up real quick. Just a little aside, right? Little ADD moment. Okay. This is 2004. Okay, if you were to look up here, can you expand it or zoom in or whatever? Okay, that's Brian. That's Sue. That's Bruce, our bass player. And this is the one time they let me be in the front. And that's me in 2004 with Rabbi Brian and Revitz and Sue. Can you just give them a hand real quick? Brian was also the first man at my wedding. And, they moved shortly up here after. So they're my dear friends. So you can go back to the other. I'm a musician, and I play several instruments, and my backup plan was to go and, write songs with the singer from my first band. And his girlfriend reconnected with her best friend from high school who had become a Christian. And I said to this girl, what do you believe? Explain to me what you believe. So we were talking on and off And then they arranged like more meetings so that we would be together because they thought, she's single, he's single, let's see what happens. And then finally I asked her out. And I said, will you go out with me? She said, well, I can't go out with you because you're not a Christian, but you go to church with me. And I thought, oh, okay, fine, let's go. Because I was really curious anyway, right? Like, I had been searching and I had questions, and, I'm pretty much down. My son knows I'm pretty much down for anything. I'll go hang out anywhere, go do anything. It got me in trouble with the drugs, but right now it's kind of cool. That's funny, you can laugh at that. And then they showed up, because she showed up with chaperones. I'd never been on anything like that. And we drove from Trenton, New Jersey to a Messianic synagogue in Philadelphia. And none of them had ever been to a Messianic synagogue either. So I walk in, and it's just like this, right? There are people blowing shofars, and they've got talits on, and, they're like, I don't know if you've ever been to Beth Yeshua in Philadelphia, but their dance circles are crazy. They got people going this way, and they go on the outside, and, and it's like all, really fast, like klezmer and everything. And I'm sitting there like in total culture shock, right? It's a Friday night, and everyone's wearing a suit, and there are these guys doing this. And I'm like, what the heck is happening? But I thought it was cool because, it's all in a minor key. I'm a musician, and, I'm looking at it like culturally. I'm just having like a cultural moment. I'm experiencing this thing. And then the lights go off, and the rabbi gets up. And I immediately tune out, right? Because it's just like, all right, well, whatever. This guy's going to get up and talk, and then we're going to go to the diner, right? And he starts talking, and in the middle of him talking, he says one line. And this is 1997. I did not have a cell phone. I tell people if I had a cell phone, I probably wouldn't be saved right now. He says, Saddam wants to destroy Tel Aviv, but Yeshua won't let him do that. And I thought to myself, who's Yeshua? And at that moment, in a dark room, the lights turned on around me. And it was like this wave. This really thick presence came out of nowhere and just surrounded me. And it was so thick and so powerful. And I was sitting in a room just like this with my head down, not because I was worshiping, but because I was bored. But this power comes in, and I'm afraid to lift my head because something is so close that I felt like if I had raised my head, I would have seen feet. And he said, I'm Yeshua. And I did not know what had just happened. But there's this presence here, and all I can feel is that there's this invitation to come. It's hard for me to explain what was going on. I knew I was supposed to follow. So all I said was, I'm coming. There was no altar call. There was no big moment. Nobody dragged me up in front. I didn't raise my hand at the end of anything. And then slowly it receded like a wave. It went back out. And I sat there for the rest of the service, and I was wondering what just happened. After the service, they told me about a Messianic congregation closer to my home in New Jersey. And 2 weeks later, I went to go check it out. I told you a little bit of a slice of that story earlier. And I went with that girl. She stayed for 6 months, and I stayed for 15 years. I wound up being the youth leader. I was like a shamashim. At one point, I was going to be an elder, and I even had a conversation with them after Brian left about maybe being the successor. I got married to a girl from Washington. We had my oldest, and then we had our first set of twins, and it became obvious that we had no family and no support around us. My family had all moved away. So she started asking the Lord about moving back to Washington, and God always gives my wife whatever she wants. So she found a job, and we moved to Seattle. A short time later, we started going to a Messianic synagogue in North Seattle called Restoration with Rabbi Matt Rosenberg. I don't know, maybe do any of you know who Matt Rosenberg is? He's got a great podcast. He puts the sermons up. It's Restoration Seattle on YouTube. I highly recommend checking out the messages. He's one of the most gifted teachers in our movement. He is also me and Rabbi Brian's rabbi's nephew. So I went from one Rosenberg congregation to another, and I stayed there for 10 years. And I served there as the worship leader and then the assistant rabbi. So I'm still an ordained Messianic rabbi. And everything was great until 2021. And I don't know if y'all remember, but in 2021, this thing that happened was essentially the fall of Kabul, right? The fall of Afghanistan, when the Taliban took back over. And I remember watching people throwing their babies over fences, begging soldiers to take their children away from what was coming, and then hanging on the side of planes and dropping to their death, so desperate to escape. You know, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, the Taliban were coming through the first time, and they killed 5,000 people in my dad's village in one day. They came through and they killed the women and the children. First, they raped the women and the children, and then they killed them, and then they took the men and they raped some of the men. And then they took them and they cut their skin off on some of them, and they threw them in the street to die, and then they cut off one hand and one foot, which is the punishment in harsher brands of Islam, let's just say, or radical Islam, to show that somebody is a kafir, a traitor to Islam. And their only crime was that they did not agree with the Taliban. They resisted the Taliban. So I knew what was coming. I saw it unfolding in front of my eyes. And I just remember sitting there watching the news one night, and it wasn't like a who will go for us moment. It was a send me moment. Right? I said, I can't watch this happening again. I can't watch this happening again. I have to do something. So I went on sabbatical in that year, 2021, January 2021, and then I remember praying about what to do next. And while I was on sabbatical, I went to go visit my mom, who lives in Turkey. And I just got compelled that there is so much low-hanging fruit in the Islamic world. So much. And I'm walking around and I'm praying about what to do. And finally it became clear to me that if I did not take another step, that I would essentially be being disobedient to the Lord. It was that powerful. And listen, I had wanted to be a Messianic rabbi from the first week I got saved. So this was not easy for me. But I took the step, and I did a podcast with the Al-Maida Initiative, who I work for now, on the fall of Afghanistan, and they offered me a job. And I went back and I prayed about it for a couple of months. And I came back from sabbatical, and I offered my resignation, and I started to work for the Al-Maida Initiative, and that's what I do to this day. So it's a great story, but what does that really mean to us? Like, why does that matter to us? Well, there are millions of Muslims who are in the same situation I'm in. My situation isn't special. It's common in the Muslim world. There are people who feel detached from their Islam, and they're going through life circumstances, and they feel the same isolation and depression that I did. But the problem is that they're trapped in a religious system that leads them away from Yeshua instead of towards him. See, Muslims, when they're going through things, when they're going through the pains of life that every human being experiences, they seek relief and deliverance from God, just like any one of us. But without accepting Yeshua as their Messiah, they will remain separated from God. But there's good news. Yeshua is able to draw Muslims to himself. He did it to me. He's able to do it to them. And even though, like when you look through the Muslim world right now, it's just chaos, right? Like Iran is bombing its allies. It's literally seems like a fulfillment of the prophecy that was given to Ishmael, that your hand will be against your brother's hand. You will attack your own relatives. But even though they may seem to be like the wildest of olive branches, right? Romans 11, God is able to graft in the wild olive branches to the tree. He's still able to graft them into the abundant life of Yeshua, and I am walking proof of that. Like in Exodus, God desires to deliver them from Islam. Just like God delivered the Jewish people from Pharaoh, God desires to deliver Muslims from Islam and set them free to worship the one and true God, Yeshua, the Messiah. Can I get an amen? You can see this in Revelation 7, 9, and 10. After these things I looked, and behold, a vast multitude that no one could count. I can't wait for this moment. From every nation and tribe, and all tribes, and all people and tongues, was standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands and crying out with a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." God has a prophetic plan to bring Muslims living in the Islamic world. And you can see this in Isaiah 19. There's no better place to find this than Isaiah 19. The burden of Egypt. Behold, the Lord rides upon a swift cloud and comes to Egypt. Egypt's idols tremble before him, and Egypt's heart melts within them. I will stir up Egyptian against Egyptian. Everyone will fight against his brother, and everyone against his brother. City against city, kingdom against kingdom. Listen, there are plenty of places in the Bible where you can look at this Isaiah 19. There are plenty of places where you see prophecy in the Bible, and you say, that was fulfilled at this time. This prophecy that I'm about to read to you is not yet fulfilled. The spirit of Egypt will drain within it, and I will confuse its counsel. So they will resort to idols and charmers and mediums and familiar spirits. I will give them, the Egyptians, into the hands of a cruel master. A fierce king will rule over them. It is a declaration of the Lord of hosts. See, during these times, a cruel Pharaoh-like oppressor will rule. He will bring fear and oppression and scarcity to all Egyptians. And whether this is an individual or a principality like Islam, we don't know yet. But they cause the same problem. His rule, or its rule, will bring political and economic turmoil to his own people and bring tension with Israel. In that day, Egypt will be like women trembling with fear because the shaking hand of Adonai Sevaot, which he is about to wave over it, the land of Judah will terrify Egypt. Anyone who mentions it will be afraid because of what Adonai Sevaot has surely purposed against it. In that day, 5 cities in Egypt will speak the language of Canaan and will swear allegiance to the Lord Almighty. One of them will be called the City of the Sun. That is Alexandria to this day, still called the City of the Sun. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt and a monument to the Lord at its border. It will be a sign and a witness to the Lord Almighty in the land of Egypt. When they will cry out to the Lord because of their oppressors, he will send them a savior and a defender, and he will rescue them. So the Lord will make himself known to the Egyptians, and in that day they will acknowledge the Lord. This has not happened yet. When we talk about a savior that will deliver from oppression, what does that look like to you? Who does that? And this is confirmed later on in this passage. In this state of desperation, a revival will break out in Alexandria, and it will spread throughout Egypt, and this will result in all Egypt turning to the Lord. God will bring healing to Egypt, and they will respond. In that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrians will come to Egypt. And the Egyptians to Assyria, and the Egyptians will worship with the Assyrians. In that day, Israel will be a third, along with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth. In that day, Israel will be a third. For the Lord Almighty has blessed, saying, "Blessed is Egypt, my people, and Assyria my handiwork, and Israel my inheritance. This is the word of the Lord. If you look at this map, I was born in Turkey. I don't have a laser pen, so excuse me, but I was born right here. And this is Cyprus. In the time of Isaiah, this is the map of Assyria, because we know what Egypt is. We know what Egypt is, and we know what Israel is, but we don't know what Assyria is. All three of these nations will enter into a covenant with God, and they're called by names that reference the Abrahamic covenant. How is this possible? Well, there's only one way that a nation can receive this kind of blessing. They must call upon the name of Yeshua. There is no other way to receive the Abrahamic blessing spoken over you. How many of you are Gentiles? How many of you are Gentiles? To be able to receive the fullness of the Abrahamic blessing, right? The Aaronic blessing over your life. You don't really fully experience it until you're a believer in Yeshua. Correct?
That's right.
Correct. Right? They must call upon the name of Yeshua. Today, the nations of Israel and Egypt are known. But what about Assyria? So, there are 150 million Muslims in Turkey and Jordan and Syria and in Iraq, where this kind of represents, and this portion of Saudi Arabia. And then there are even more in Egypt. So there are about 350 million Muslims in this area, represented by this map. And the borders of the Assyrian Empire ebb and flow throughout time. I showed you where I live, because if you go there to this day where I was born, the Assyrian Empire still has its footprint there. They find archaeological digs there, and they'll dig up things from the Sumerians and the Assyrians and the Hittites. I mean, it's as far as that. These nations today are Iraq and Syria and Turkey and Iran, also Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel. 350 million Muslims live in this country. Today, this shows us that God has a plan for the Middle East and for Muslims everywhere. Because if he can do it over there, he could do it here. I am walking proof of this. So what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? It's a great story, Rabbi, and it's awesome that God is doing all these crazy things. I might not really know a lot of Muslims. Listen, I just looked up the statistics just sitting here. There are over 13,000 Muslims in Rhode Island. In Massachusetts, there are over 150,000. And I think that those statistics are actually out of date. Because one thing that happens with Muslims is that once they get a relative in one place, they'll all go live around that relative, right? They'll start buying houses, They'll start running for office. They'll start drawing other Muslims to those places. So what seemed like maybe a couple of thousand a couple of years ago turns into this huge number. And it's happening across the United States, right? Not just here, but it happened in Detroit and Dearborn. It's happening in New York City. I live in Seattle. There's when the fall of Afghanistan happened, there were about 3,000 Afghans that were brought in. There are over 10,000 Afghans there now, just Afghans. And that means other Muslims as well. So what do we do about it? Well, that's why it's relevant, but what do we do about it? You see, God's promises were made in the past, but they will be fulfilled in the future. And we're called to work toward those promises today, each and every one of us. But how? What do you do? What do I actually do? Listen, the first thing is to train your mind to see Muslims as opportunities, not opponents. There is a stigma that's been in this country since 9/11. And listen, those things happened. I lived in New Jersey. I remember when it happened. I was dating a girl in Nutley, New Jersey, and I used to drive past the smoldering ruins of the Twin Towers 3 times a week to go see her. Islamic extremism has affected my life. It's easy to wear jaded glasses or have a lens that makes you look at these people and say, you know what, I want to go debate them. into the kingdom. I need to meet their expansion with hostility. But listen, this is a divine opportunity for you as a believer to not step into the moment as an opponent, but to step in as someone who can be a conduit for God's grace. See, more often than not, instead of listening to what you say, a Muslim will watch what you do. Amen. They will watch your behavior. They've been trained, a lot of them, from the time they were kids. I was, about why Jesus isn't the Messiah, why Islam is the way you are supposed to walk. That's the only path to God, right? Unless they're syncretic, that's a different story. But truth be told, they're going to watch your behavior. They're going to watch first if you're hostile. They're going to watch if you're living if you practice what you preach. Like if you say, I'm a follower of Jesus, but then, you're getting a little too drunk, or, you're watching porn or whatever, right? Like those things, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, you're no better. Why is what you have better than what I have? Because your life is a mess. You have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to step into the moment and to represent Yeshua well. To be a loving believer, walking in the power of the love of God. Yeah, you know what? You do that, eventually, over time, you'll get a chance to explain what they believe, what you believe to them. And then you'll have great conversations, because they'll look at you and they'll say, this is a person who has integrity. This is a person I can trust. Their life matches up with what they say. Also, understanding Muslims and how to communicate with them is just like learning a language. Listen, I'm not just talking about terminology, but I am talking about terminology. These things are also important, right? Like if you don't know what the Quran is and you walk into a conversation, you say, well, that book you all read, right? All right, you don't really care about me. You've just got an agenda or an angle. You've just got something you want to accomplish. You just want to add me to your book of all the people you turn to Jesus. Remember, Muslims are not harder to talk to than anyone else. It might seem that way. If you're older, you remember a movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's an old Kubrick movie. I'm a big sci-fi guy. First movie I ever saw was Star Wars. And in this movie, a giant obelisk appears to a bunch of prehistoric apes, right? And they're automatically terrified by it. And they run back and forth, and they touch it, and they run away, and they touch it, and they run away, right? They get all freaked out. I think a lot of us view Islam that way. Listen, there's this thing, and it's cold, and it's foreboding, and I don't understand it. They come, and their customs are different. The women cover their head. They look different. They act different. They have a different belief system than me. But that doesn't make them harder to talk to than anyone else. It just takes a degree of courage. It takes a degree of fortitude to be able to say, look, I'm not only going to pray for Muslims, I'm going to go befriend one. I'm going to go talk to one. I want to get to know what they believe. I want to know about their families. I want to know about their customs. I want to listen to what they're saying before I jump in and tell them why they're wrong. Listen, we at the Al-Maida Initiative want to help. We have a ton of stuff on YouTube. I highly, maybe at the end we can leave this up so people can scan it. And also, my son will be in the back with an iPad, so you can sign up for our newsletter. And also, get access to our webpage and all that other stuff. We want to help you. We have designed a ton of content on YouTube that we give away for free that helps Christians understand Islam and helps Muslims understand Christianity. Some of it's long form, some of it's interviews, some of it's short form, but I invite you to take part in what we're doing. We're not asking you for any donations or anything like that, but of course we are supported as a 501c3 through donations, but this is for you for free, so that when you talk to Muslims, you'll be equipped. You'll be equipped to talk about things like the World Cup that happened in Qatar, right? We had the Iran-Egypt match in Seattle during Pride Day. There was a lot of chaos. I have a friend who's an Egyptian pastor, and he was Iranian pastor, and he was handing out Bibles during that. And, he got confronted. Usually in Seattle, if you do something that's like biblically oriented and public, the people like Antifa come and oppose you. But this time it was the Muslims. Like, we're trying to stop him from handing out Bibles to other Muslims, right? He's on our board. I love him. His name's Mansour Kajapur. We want to be able to prepare you for moments like that. We want to be able to prepare you for things that are happening in the culture around you day by day by day. If you go to the Walmart in my town, right, about 20 minutes away from my house, I guarantee at any point, and it wasn't like that 10 years ago, that there is a Muslim family in there. It'll be a woman, it'll be 4 or 5 kids, and a dad, and there'll be several of them, or it'll be a couple of Muslim boys trying to go get a soda, right? Or a couple of girls looking at makeup or something like that. Like 10 to 15 Muslims in this Walmart at any given time. And the more and more you get to a metropolitan area, the more and more you'll see the opportunities that I'm talking about. You could look at them as adversaries, but I implore you not to, because that's not how God looked at them. See, for me, what happened was when I got saved, I came to realize later that my way of fixing things was to go back to the religion that led me away from God. But God orchestrated my steps, put me in a room just like this one, and revealed himself to me by his Hebrew name. Every one of you could be in a situation. You could have been any one of the people in that room that night. And I know that God wants to do that to other Muslims. He wants to do that to Muslims that live right by you. Because listen, I'm a Jersey boy. I'm a Jersey boy at heart, and I lived among a million other Jersey boys. But I was a Muslim, and God had a plan for me, and he put me in the right place at the right time with the right people. And those people loved me out of Islam. They were praying for me before I ever showed up. I was there. God revealed himself. And those people that God put around me, were the most loving people in my life. They changed literally the way that I view God. Rabbi Jan taught me, how to love others unconditionally. Beth Zion is in Lakewood. The Orthodox hate him. And I would look at him and I'd be like, why aren't you getting mad? You should fight. You should complain. You should call the cops. They're spitting on you. They're mad at you. They're protesting you. They're trying to shut down your events. Blah, 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 blah. And each time he turned the other cheek. He did not view his adversaries as opportunities to debate. He viewed them as opportunities to be able to reach people with the love of God. And I implore you to apply that same principle when it comes to Muslims, because God wants to and can do it. Amen. If you want to connect with us, these are our email addresses. The Max will be in the back with the iPad. You can also go to muslimsandjesus.com, because I realize that almaida.org/mail is a handful. That'll take you to the webpage, and you will have an opportunity to do it there as well.